This is the BBC.
Welcome to the World of Business podcast. I'm Jonty Bloom, and for this edition I've travelled to Paris with producer Ruth Alexander to find out why France's productivity figures are just so good.
Oui, s'il vous plaît. Well, I've got my cheese for the weekend, and it's going to be a special treat because I'm buying it in a market in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower here in France from one of those typical stalls which just has everything you want. And there are many like that here. There's a greengrocers in front of me selling every kind of fruit and veg you can imagine. There's a fishmongers, there's a florist's, there's a stall selling nothing but homemade honey and jam and pickles. It's all very attractive, very touristy. But if you think about it, remarkably unproductive and inefficient. Each of these stallholders was up at the crack of dawn, loading the vans, which are parked behind the stalls. They had to pick up their produce, come here, unload it, set everything up, and start business. Yet if you look at the French economy, it's amazingly productive, and one of its best sectors is retail. That's not because of markets like this, no matter how pleasant they are. It's because of its fantastic supermarkets and hypermarkets, some of the best run in the world.
Like this one on the outskirts of Paris, anything more remote from a simple market stall, it's hard to imagine. It seems to stretch for miles in every direction.
To give you some idea of the scale of this supermarket, I'm now walking down the aisle which has nothing but tinned vegetables in it. It's quite a display, as you might expect in France, and it's not the only one. There's everything from fish to fridges, TVs, recording equipment, some books, clothes, absolutely everything you could want, all in one place with very few staff around at all except on the checkouts. And I'm just getting to the end of the tinned veg.
A row of tinned veg may not be a typical economic indicator, but in this case it's a good stand-in for one, because the hyper-efficient retail sector is one of the reasons France as a whole is hyper-productive. John Van Reenen is Professor of Economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT.
France, on the latest figures, is about 30% more productive than the UK.
30%. Almost a full third. French productivity, as measured by gross domestic product per hour worked, is almost a third higher than in France's next-door neighbour, the UK.
So it's saying for every hour that the French people put in, they manage to get about 30% more output than the average British person does.
But does high productivity make for a better economy? Certainly it has its advantages. The average French worker could stop work on Thursday lunchtime and still make as much as the average British worker does in a full week. In fact, many of them probably do just that. How would you like an extra long bank holiday weekend every weekend? That may not bother you, but it certainly bothers the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
You probably know that our national productivity is lower than that of the US and Germany. Perhaps you even feel somewhat resigned to that fact. But did you know that it's lower than France and Italy too? If we raised our productivity by just 1% every year, within a decade, we would add £250 billion to the size of our economy. That's £9,000 for every household in Britain.
That seems like a prize worth winning, but just how does France make itself so productive? Well, let's start with that retail sector. It's certainly been helped by looser planning regulations that have enabled the industry to build massive hypermarkets on the outskirts of every town, but economies of scale aren't the complete answer.
2 cafés au lait et pour moi un Coca Light. Zéro, ouais, très bien.
Professor Philippe Askenazi of the École Normale Supérieure in Paris is the expert in this area. I met him for a coffee when he started a conversation about his latest holiday. Apparently, they're very good for productivity. I must take more.
We have probably more holidays than some OECD countries, but when we are at work, we work hard.
Philippe's been studying French supermarkets because they're the most productive in the OECD, the club of the richest Western economies, which is based in Paris.
when you look at really the work of the cashiers, the pace of work is much higher in France than in the rest of the OECD country. Why? First, because they have a very tight monitoring.
Crucially, this monitoring is done by technology. Managers can tell from the tills exactly how many customers the cashier has served.
They know perfectly the productivity of each worker, of each cashier. So in the when you are going in the back office of a French hypermarket, each day you have the performance of each cashier. And you know...
On the wall in a chart.
On the wall, and you have the rank of the different cashiers. So you have them incentive payments given to the best cashier of the week, for example, or a gift. You can win a bicycle, for example, if you are the best cashier of the month.
And then the supermarkets and the rest